I need to tell someone this. I've been carrying it for 11 weeks now, and I can feel it doing something to me, not physically, not exactly, but in the way that a word you can't remember sits at the back of your tongue and slowly drives you out of your mind. It's like that, except the word is a room. And the room is underneath the house where I grew up spending summers. And inside that room is an answer to a question I never should have asked. My grandfather is dead. He died on a Tuesday in March in his recliner, watching the Weather Channel with the volume turned all the way down. My mother found him the next morning when he didn't answer the phone. She said he looked peaceful. She said it like it was a gift, like dying in silence was something he'd earned. But I know now why the volume was off. I know why the house was silent, and I know that whatever peace was on his face when they found him, it wasn't peace. It was discipline. The last act of a man who'd spent 43 years making sure he never ever made a sound after dark. My name doesn't matter. Where I live doesn't matter. What matters is the house in Harlan County, Kentucky, where my grandfather lived alone for the last 2 decades of his life. What matters is what I found underneath it, and what I think followed me home. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I am not a superstitious person. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. I work for a firm that designs load-bearing structures for commercial buildings. I believe in weight and force and the mathematics of how things hold together. I'm telling you this so you understand what I'm about to describe didn't happen to the kind of person who sees ghosts in curtains or hears demons in static. It happened to me, and I still can't explain it, and that's the part that won't let me sleep. My grandfather was a quiet man. Not quiet the way people say it at funerals to fill space. He was genuinely, almost unnervingly quiet. He had this way of sitting in a room with you for an hour without saying a word, just watching the tree line through the window or running his thumb along the edge of a coffee mug. When he did speak, it was in short, deliberate sentences. Like every word cost him something. His name was Earl David Maddox. He was born in 1941 in a coal town that doesn't exist anymore. He served in the Army, not Vietnam. Something before that, something he never talked about. When I was a kid, I once asked him where he'd been stationed, and he looked at me with this expression I didn't understand until much later. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness, it was calculation. Like he was measuring how much of the truth I could survive. "Nowhere you'd find on a map," he said. And then he offered me a butterscotch candy and changed the subject. He married my grandmother in 1966. They had one daughter, my mother. In 1969, my grandmother died in 1987 of pancreatic cancer. After that, Grandpa Earl lived alone in their house on Sutter Ridge Road. It was a modest place. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with green linoleum that hadn't been updated since the 70s. Sat on 11 acres of dense Appalachian forest. Nearest neighbor was almost 2 miles down the road. I spent summers there as a kid. I loved it. I loved the quiet, the creek that ran along the back of the property, the way the mountains looked like sleeping animals in the evening light. Grandpa Earl would take me fishing. He'd let me ride in the bed of his truck on the dirt roads. He taught me how to whittle and how to identify copperheads and how to build a fire that would last all night. But there were rules. There were always rules. I didn't think much of them when I was young. Old people have rules. Don't track mud inside. Don't leave the screen door open. Don't waste food. Normal things. But some of Grandpa Earl's rules were different. Never go into the basement. That was the big one. The door to the basement was in the hallway between the kitchen and the back bedroom. It was a plain wooden door, painted the same off-white as the walls, with a deadbolt that locked from the outside. There was no reason I could see to lock a basement door from the outside, but it was always locked, and the key lived on a cord around Grandpa Earl's neck, tucked inside his shirt. I asked about it once when I was maybe 8. He told me the stairs were rotted and it wasn't safe. That seemed reasonable. I didn't ask again. The second rule was about noise. After 9 o'clock at night, we were quiet. Not just indoor voices, quiet. Silent. He never phrased it as a rule exactly. He'd just start lowering his voice around 8:30, and by 9, He'd put a finger to his lips if I started talking above a whisper. The TV went off. The radio went off. We'd sit on the porch if the weather was good, or he'd read and I'd draw at the kitchen table, and neither of us would say a word until morning. I thought it was just how he was, an old man's routine. Some people like silence. The third rule I didn't learn until I was 12. I'd been playing in the tree line behind the house, maybe 40 yards from the back porch, and I found something strange. There was a ring of stones set into the ground, not natural, clearly placed about 6 feet in diameter. In the center was a wooden post about waist high, weathered gray, with something carved into the top. I couldn't make it out. I leaned closer. It looked like a symbol. Concentric circles with a line cutting through them, almost like a stylized eye. Grandpa Earl appeared behind me, like he'd materialized from the air itself. I hadn't heard him coming. He grabbed my shoulder, not hard, but firm, and turned me around. "You don't go near that," he said. His voice was flat. No anger. Something worse than anger. Something that sounded like fear compressed into a single controlled sentence. "What is it?" I asked. "A marker," he said. "For something that doesn't concern you." He walked me back to the house. We didn't talk about it again. He made me a grilled cheese sandwich and let me watch an extra hour of cartoons, and by the next morning it felt like a dream. I didn't go back to the stone ring. Not for almost 20 years. Grandpa Earl died on March 11th. The funeral was small. A few people from town, a pastor who clearly didn't know him well, my mother, my Uncle Ray, and me. My Uncle Ray is my mother's half-brother from my grandmother's first marriage. He and Grandpa Earl were never close, but he showed up, stood at the back of the church, and left before the reception. My mother asked me to help clean out the house. She couldn't do it alone, not emotionally, not physically. She'd been battling her own health issues, and the idea of spending days in that house, touching her father's things, packing up his life, it was too much. I told her I'd handle it. I took a week off work, drove down from Louisville, and arrived at the house on Sutter Ridge Road on a Thursday afternoon. It was late March, but winter was still holding on in Harlan County. The trees were bare. The sky was the color of old concrete. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the way childhood places always do. But it also looked tired. The porch sagged on one side. The gutters were rusted. The paint was peeling in long curling strips that made the walls look like they were shedding skin. I unlocked the front door with the key my mother had given me and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Not rot, not decay, just absence. The stale museum smell of a place where the air hasn't moved in weeks. Dust on every surface. His recliner still faced the television. His coffee mug sat on the end table, a dark ring dried inside it. On the kitchen counter, a calendar was still turned to February. I set my bag down in the back bedroom and spent the first few hours just walking through the rooms. I wasn't packing yet. I was remembering. The green linoleum, the wood-paneled walls, the window above the kitchen sink where Grandpa Earl used to stand and watch the ridge while the coffee percolated. Everything was exactly as I remembered it. Everything was exactly as it had been for 30 years. Except one thing. The basement door was open. Not wide open. Cracked. Maybe 3 inches. The deadbolt was disengaged and the door had drifted inward, revealing a slice of darkness so complete it looked solid. Like someone had cut a rectangle out of the wall and replaced it with black velvet. I stood in the hallway and stared at it for a long time. My first thought was practical. My mother must have opened it when she came to identify the body, or the paramedics, or the police. Someone had unlocked the door and hadn't bothered to close it. My second thought was less practical. The key. The key had been on a cord around Grandpa Earl's neck for as long as I could remember. My mother hadn't mentioned taking it. The paramedics wouldn't have had a reason to open a basement door. And the police, what police? He died of natural causes in his living room. I reached out and pushed the door open a few more inches. Cold air rose from below. Not the cool of an underground space, something sharper. Something that felt wet even though it wasn't. I could see the top of a wooden staircase descending into the dark. The stairs didn't look rotted. They looked solid, well-maintained even. He'd lied to me. That shouldn't have bothered me as much as it did. Adults lie to children all the time, especially about things that aren't safe. But this was Grandpa Earl. The man who told me truth was the only thing you own that nobody can take from you. The man who once made me walk a mile back to a gas station to return 35 cents I'd been given in extra change. He'd looked me in the eye and told me those stairs were rotted. And they weren't. I didn't go down. Not yet. I closed the door and I went back to work. I spent the next 2 days packing his belongings into boxes. Clothes, books, kitchen things. He didn't own much. Grandpa Earl was not a man of possessions. His wardrobe was 5 flannel shirts, 3 pairs of work pants, and a Sunday suit that still had the dry cleaning tag from 2019. His bookshelves held mostly field guides, birds, plants, mushrooms, Appalachian wildlife, and a King James Bible with a cracked spine and dozens of passages underlined in pencil. I found a box of photographs in the bedroom closet. Most of them were what you'd expect. My grandmother as a young woman, my mother as a baby, a few of Grandpa Earl in his army uniform. Young, lean, unsmiling, but at the bottom of the box, wrapped in a piece of cloth, there was a photograph I'd never seen before. It showed a group of men standing in front of a building I didn't recognize. Low, concrete, no windows. The kind of structure you'd see at a military installation. There were 9 men in the photograph, all wearing civilian clothes, all looking at the camera with expressions that ranged from serious to exhausted. Grandpa Earl was second from the left. He looked maybe 40. Behind the group, partially visible, was a sign. Most of it was cut off by the edge of the frame, but I could make out 3 letters, SRI. I turned the photograph over. On the back, someone had written in pencil, not Grandpa Earl's handwriting, someone else's, a single line, Harlan Station Crew, 6-1984. God help us. I put the photograph on the kitchen table and stared at it while I ate dinner. Harlan Station. I'd never heard of it. SRI could be anything. Stanford Research Institute came to mind. But what would that have to do with Harlan County, Kentucky? And God help us. That wasn't the kind of thing you wrote on the back of a work photo. That was something else entirely. I thought about calling my mother. I picked up the phone twice and put it back down. Something told me she either didn't know or didn't want to know, and I wasn't sure which possibility was worse. That night, I slept in the back bedroom, or tried to. The house was quiet, the kind of deep, weighted quiet that only exists in places far from roads and people. No traffic, no sirens, just the occasional creak of old wood settling and the wind touching the windows. At some point after midnight, I woke up. I don't know what woke me. There was no sound, no light, just a sudden total alertness. The way you come awake when your body knows something is wrong, before your mind does. I lay there in the dark and listened. Nothing. And then so faint I almost convinced myself I was imagining it, a sound from below the floor. Not a knock, not a thump, more like a vibration, a hum. So low it was more felt than heard, like standing near a transformer on a utility pole. It lasted maybe 5 seconds. Then it stopped. I held my breath. I counted to 60. Nothing else came. I told myself it was pipes. I told myself it was the foundation settling. I told myself a lot of things. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I went into town to get more packing supplies. I stopped at the hardware store, a place called Bellamy's that looked like it hadn't changed since 1975. And while the owner was ringing up my boxes and tape, I asked him a question. Did you know my grandfather, Earl Maddox, lived out on Sutter Ridge Road? The man Bellamy himself, I assumed. A heavy-set guy in his 60s with a gray beard and careful eyes, paused with his hand on the register. "Everybody knew Earl," he said. "Good man. Kept to himself. Did he ever mention his work? What he did before he retired?" Bellamy looked at me. There was a shift in his expression, subtle, but I caught it, like a door closing behind his eyes. "He was retired, long as I knew him," Bellamy said. "Since the 80s at least. Before that I couldn't say." "What about something called Harlan's Station?" The register beeped. Bellamy tore off the receipt and handed it to me. He didn't look at me when he spoke next. "That's not a name I'd go asking about," he said. "Especially not around here, especially not to people who remember." "Remember what?" He put my boxes on the counter and slid them toward me. "Your grandfather was a good man," he said again. This time, it sounded like a warning. I drove back to the house. I sat in the truck for a while, looking at the front porch, the sagging gutters, the dark windows. I thought about what Bellamy had said. I thought about the photograph. I thought about the basement door, cracked open, waiting. I went inside, walked down the hallway, and opened the basement door all the way. The cold came up again, that sharp, wet feeling cold. The staircase descended about 12 steps into total darkness. I got the flashlight from my truck, a heavy mag light that Grandpa Earl himself had given me years ago, and pointed it down. The stairs ended on a concrete floor. I could see the edge of a wall, nothing else. I went down. The basement was larger than I expected, much larger. The house above was modest, maybe 1,100 square feet. But the space below seemed to extend beyond the footprint of the house itself, reaching outward into the hillside. The ceiling was low, maybe 7 feet, and the walls were poured concrete, smooth and gray and cold to the touch. There was no moisture, no mold, no insects. The air was dry and stale and carried a faint smell I couldn't identify. Something chemical, something preserved. The first room was mostly empty. A workbench along one wall, a few tools hanging on pegs, a stack of 5-gallon buckets in the corner. A normal basement, but at the far end there was another door. Metal this time. Heavy. It had a handle, like you'd see on a walk-in cooler, and a sliding bolt lock on the outside. I pulled the bolt. I pulled the handle. The door swung open on silent hinges, recently oiled, I realized. Someone had been maintaining this door. Recently. Behind it was a hallway. Concrete walls, fluorescent light fixtures on the ceiling, all dark. The hallway was maybe 30 feet long and ended at another door, identical to the first. But along the left wall there were shelves. Metal industrial shelving, floor to ceiling. And on those shelves were boxes. Dozens of them. File boxes. The kind you'd see in a records room. Each one was labeled with a year, written in Grandpa Earl's meticulous block printing, all the way through 2024. 43 years of records. 43 years of something that mattered enough to organize, to preserve, to lock behind 2 heavy doors in a basement he told me didn't have safe stairs. I pulled the box labeled 1981. Inside were notebooks, composition notebooks with black and white marbled covers, the kind you buy at a drugstore. I opened the first one. Grandpa Earl's handwriting filled every page. Small, precise, disciplined. It was a log. Dated entries, sometimes multiple per day. I started reading. March 14th, 1981. Arrived at the site today. Met the rest of the crew, 8 other men, all recruited the same way I was, separately, quietly. No one was told much beforehand. We were given coordinates and a time, told to bring work clothes and nothing else. The site is an old mining facility, about 4 miles northeast of Elcombe. The entrance is through a horizontal shaft cut into the hillside. The shaft has been reinforced and expanded. Concrete walls, steel supports, electrical wiring. This isn't a mine anymore. It's something else. Briefing was conducted by a man who introduced himself only as Director Calloway. Military bearing, maybe 50. He didn't waste words. He told us we'd been selected for a long-term monitoring assignment. He used that word, monitoring. He said the work was classified. He said we'd be compensated well, and that our employment records would reflect a position with the Department of Interior, Resource Management Division. He said we would not discuss the nature of our work with anyone. Not family, not friends, and not each other outside of operational necessity. Then he took us into the shaft. I don't know how to describe what I saw at the end of it. I'm going to try. The shaft runs about 200 yards into the mountain. At the end, it opens into a natural cavern, limestone, high ceiling, maybe 80 feet across. In the center of the cavern, there is a hole. Not a sinkhole, not a natural formation. A hole, perfectly circular, roughly 12 feet in diameter. The edges are smooth, unnaturally smooth, like polished stone. It goes straight down. We dropped a flare. We watched it fall. The light got smaller and smaller and smaller. It never hit bottom. Calloway told us the hole had been discovered in 1973 by a USGS survey team mapping underground water systems. The original team reported it, and within 48 hours the site was sealed by federal order. Since then, it has been under continuous observation. He told us 3 things about the hole. 1. It does not have a measurable bottom. Every instrument lowered into it has either returned inconclusive data or failed to return at all. 2. The hole emits a low-frequency sound, below the range of human hearing, but detectable with equipment. The frequency changes. It has a pattern, but the pattern has never been decoded. 3. The hole is not empty. He did not elaborate on the 3rd point. He said we would learn more during our shifts. He said understanding would come with time. I stood at the edge of that hole tonight during my first watch. I looked down into it. It looked back. I don't know how else to say it. I read that entry 3 times. I sat on the cold concrete floor of that hallway with the flashlight propped on my knee, and I read it 3 times, and each time the words meant the same thing, and each time I wanted them to mean something different. My grandfather had spent 43 years watching a hole in the ground, a hole that had no bottom, a hole that wasn't empty. I pulled more notebooks. I read forward. The early entries were methodical, clinical almost. He described the daily routine. 6-hour shifts, teams of 2, monitoring equipment, recording readings. The monitoring station was a small room built adjacent to the cavern, separated from the hole by a concrete wall with a single reinforced window. The equipment measured seismic activity, air pressure, temperature, and the low-frequency sound which they called the signal. The signal was constant. It never stopped. It pulsed at a frequency of approximately 7 Hz, just below the threshold of human hearing, but close enough that some of the crew reported feeling it in their chests during long shifts. It was rhythmic, almost like breathing. In April 1981, the signal changed. April 19, 1981. The frequency shifted tonight during my shift. Reynolds and I both noticed it at the same time the equipment spiked, and I felt it in my teeth. The usual 7 Hz dropped to 3 Hz. Slower, deeper, like whatever is making the sound was exhaling, longer breath. If it's breath. We followed protocol, logged the change, notified Calloway via the radio. He didn't respond for 11 minutes. When he did, he asked one question. Is there movement? I looked through the observation window. The cavern was lit by 4 floodlights mounted on the ceiling. The hole was visible. The edges were the same, but the air above it looked different. Not haze, not heat distortion. Something else. Like the darkness inside the hole was leaning upward, reaching. The way smoke rises from a cigarette when there's no wind, straight and deliberate. I told Calloway there was no movement. I don't know why I said that. There was movement. I could see it. But something about it made me not want to describe it out loud, as if saying it would make it more real, as if the words themselves were an invitation. The frequency returned to 7 hertz by morning. I spent hours down there. I lost track of time. The notebooks pulled me forward, entry by entry, year by year, and I couldn't stop. The story they told was slow and terrible and relentless, and I kept reading because I kept hoping one of the entries would explain everything, would give me the rational explanation, the government project, the classified experiment, the mundane truth wrapped in dramatic language. That explanation never came. Over the years, the crew settled into routine. Grandpa Earl became the senior member by the mid-80s. The others rotated out, some left voluntarily, some were transferred. A few simply stopped showing up and were replaced without comment. But Grandpa Earl stayed. He stayed because he understood something the others didn't, something he wrote about in a 1986 entry that I've read so many times I can recite it from memory. It isn't sleeping. I used to think it was dormant, that we were watching over something inert, a geological anomaly with strange properties, something science hadn't categorized yet. I don't think that anymore. It's aware, not the way an animal is aware, not the way a person is aware. Something else. It knows the schedule. It knows when the shifts change. The signal adjusts when new crew arrive. It spikes for the first few days like it's tasting them, learning them. Then it settles. Calloway knows. He's known since the beginning. That's why the rules exist. That's why we don't make sound near the opening after dark. That's why we don't look into the hole for more than 30 seconds at a time. That's why we never ever respond if we hear something come from inside it. Because it listens. And what it hears, it learns. And what it learns, it uses. That's when the rules started appearing in the notebooks. Not the operational rules, the other ones. Grandpa Earl's rules. The ones he developed himself, through observation, through testing, through what I can only describe as a decades-long conversation with something that wasn't human, and wasn't natural, and wasn't supposed to exist. Rule 1. Never speak above a whisper within the cavern. It processes language. It remembers voices. Rule 2. Do not look into the hole for extended periods. After approximately 30 seconds, the visual field begins to distort. After 60 seconds, subjects report seeing shapes. After 90 seconds, subjects stop responding. Rule 3. The signal frequency below 3 Hz indicates active state. Evacuate the observation room immediately. Do not return until the frequency rises above 5 Hz. Rule 4. If you hear your name spoken from inside the hole, do not respond. Do not acknowledge it. Leave the cavern immediately. It uses recognition as a form of contact. Rule 5. The stone markers on the surface above the cavern must be maintained. Their purpose is not understood, but removal or disturbance of the markers correlates with increased signal activity. The stone markers, the ring of stones behind the house, the ones I'd found as a child, the ones Grandpa Earl had pulled me away from, with fear in his eyes. The house was directly above it, or near enough. The monitoring station was inside the mountain, but the cavern extended outward, and the hole was somewhere beneath the property, beneath the land where I'd played as a child, beneath the ground where I'd caught fireflies and waded in the creek and fallen asleep, listening to crickets. It had been below me the entire time. I came upstairs. It was dark. I don't mean evening dark, I mean fully, completely dark. I'd gone down into the basement in the early afternoon and I hadn't come back up for at least 7 hours. My phone had died at some point. The house was black except for the flashlight in my hand. And it was past 9 o'clock. Grandpa Earl's rule. Quiet after 9. No sound. I'd always thought it was an old man's preference. Now I knew what it really was. It was protocol. It was the same rule he followed at the monitoring station. Don't make sound. Don't let it hear you. Because the hole was down there. Below the house. Below the floor. And whatever was inside it could hear through the earth itself. I stood in the kitchen, in the dark, and I didn't move. I barely breathed, and I listened. The house was silent. The world was silent. And then, from somewhere beneath the floorboards, so deep and so low that I felt it more than heard it. There was a hum, that same vibration I'd felt the other night. The signal. 7 hertz. Steady, patient, like a heartbeat that had been beating since before I was born, and would keep beating long after I was gone. I went to the back bedroom. I didn't turn on a light. I lay down on the bed in my clothes and I pulled the blanket over me like I was a child again. And I stared at the ceiling and I didn't make a sound. I didn't sleep. I just waited for morning. The sun came up around 7. I got up immediately, made coffee and went back down. I know how that sounds. A rational person would have left. A rational person would have packed the truck and driven back to Louisville and never looked back. But you have to understand, this was my grandfather. This was the man who taught me to tie my shoes and bait a hook and read a compass. This was the man who sat with me on the porch in silence because he loved me, and silence was all he had left to give. He'd spent 43 years down here. He'd spent his entire adult life keeping watch over something that the rest of the world didn't know existed. And I wanted to understand why. I pulled the box labeled 1991, 10 years into his work. By then the entries were different. The clinical detachment was gone. In its place was something I can only describe as weary intimacy. He'd been living with this thing for a decade. He knew its rhythms. He knew its moods, if something like that can have moods. And his writing reflected a man who had crossed from observer to participant, a reluctant one, but a participant all the same. June 3rd, 1991. It spoke again last night, 3rd time this year. Reynolds heard it. First he grabbed my arm during the 0200 watch and pointed at the monitoring equipment. The signal had dropped to 2.4 hertz, active state. We should have evacuated. We didn't. I don't know why. Maybe because after 10 years you start to feel like the rules are more suggestion than law. Or maybe because I wanted to hear what it would say. It doesn't speak the way we do. The sound comes from the hole, but it isn't a voice. It's more like pressure, like the air itself is being shaped into meaning. You don't hear it with your ears. You hear it in the center of your skull, in the soft tissue behind your eyes. The first time it happened back in '84, I thought I was having a stroke. It said a word, one word, my name, Earl, but not the way a person says a name. The way an echo says a name like it, caught it off the cavern walls, held it, studied it, and put it back together from memory. The inflection was wrong. The vowel was too long, but it was my name. Reynolds looked at me. I shook my head. We did not respond. That's the rule. You never respond. But here's what I didn't write in the official log. Here's what I've never told anyone. When it said my name, I felt something. Not fear, not even surprise. Recognition, like seeing someone you knew in a past life. Like hearing a language you spoke as a child and forgot. I think it knows me, not my name me. What I am, what I think, what I feel when I stand at the edge and look down. And I think I'm starting to know it. September 22nd, 1991. Calloway is dead. Heart attack, they say. He was 71. The new director is a woman named Chen. Younger, sharper. She doesn't have Calloway's patience. She briefed us on new protocols, more equipment, more data collection, shorter shifts. She wants to understand the phenomenon through rigorous methodology. She doesn't understand yet. You can't study it the way you study a rock formation or a magnetic field. It isn't passive, it participates in the observation. When you measure it, it measures you back. When you record the signal adjusts. It's not reacting to the equipment, it's reacting to the attention. I tried to explain this to Chen. She looked at me like I was suffering from long-term exposure to infrasound. Maybe I am, but I know what I know. She brought a new piece of equipment last week, a deep sonar array, military grade. She wanted to map the interior geometry of the hole. They lowered the array at 0800 on a Wednesday. The signal was at baseline. 7.1 hertz, normal. By the time the array reached 400 meters, the signal had dropped to 4 hertz. By 600 meters, it was at 2.8 hertz. The equipment started returning data. Chen was excited. She was reading the returns on the monitor, calling out numbers: depth, diameter, temperature. At 900 meters, the array stopped descending. Not because it ran out of cable, because something stopped it. The tension on the cable spiked. The equipment showed a contact return, solid. Something was down there. Something had hold of the array, and then the signal dropped to 1.1 hertz. I'd never seen it that low. I didn't know it could go that low. The entire cavern vibrated. The floodlights flickered. My vision blurred. I felt I don't know how to describe it. I felt like I was being read. Like every thought in my head was being turned over and examined by something that didn't think the way I think. Something vast, something patient, something that had been waiting. The cable snapped. The array was gone. The signal returned to 7 hertz within 90 seconds. Chen was pale. She didn't say anything for a long time. She canceled the deep sonar program that afternoon. I read through the 90s, I read through the 2000s. The entries became less frequent but more detailed. Grandpa Earl was the last original crew member by 1998. The others had all left or been replaced. He trained the new ones. He taught them the rules. Some of them listened. Some didn't. The ones who didn't listen didn't last. There were incidents. He wrote about them with the flat, controlled grief of a man who has seen too many people make the same mistake. A man named Duarte, in 2003, who stood at the edge of the hole during a low-frequency event and stared down for over 2 minutes. When his partner pulled him back, Duarte's eyes were open but empty. He was breathing. His heart was beating. But he was gone. Whatever made him Duarte had been scooped out like the inside of a melon. He spent 3 weeks in a catatonic state at a VA hospital in Lexington before his heart stopped. A woman named Park, in 2011, who heard her dead mother's voice rising from the hole during a night shift. She responded. She said, "Mom." One word, one small, human word. The signal dropped to 0.8 hertz, the lowest ever recorded, and every piece of monitoring equipment in the station went dark simultaneously. When the lights came back on 40 seconds later, Park was standing at the edge of the hole with 1 foot extended over the emptiness, her body tilted forward at an angle that should have been impossible to maintain. Her partner tackled her. She fought him. She screamed. She said the voice was still talking, that it was telling her to come down, that everything was warm and dark and perfect down there. They sedated her. She was transferred. Grandpa Earl never learned where. After that, he added a new rule. Rule 6. If the signal drops below 2 hertz and you hear a familiar voice, plug your ears and do not remove the plugs until the frequency stabilizes. The voice is not real. The person it belongs to is not there. It uses love as bait, grief as a doorway, longing as a rope. I was deep in the 2010s when I found the entry that changed everything. The one that moved the story from down there to up here, from the mountain to the house. November 8th, 2017. I've made a decision. I may be wrong. I probably am. But after 36 years, I think I've earned the right to be wrong about this. The signal has been changing, not in frequency. The frequency is the same. 7 hertz baseline, same as always. But the pattern has shifted. It used to pulse in irregular intervals, sometimes 2 seconds between pulses, sometimes 5, sometimes 12. Random. Or at least, we thought it was random. It's not random. I see the pattern now. It took me 3 decades, but I see it. The pulses correspond to footsteps. My footsteps. I tested it last week. I walked to the observation window. I counted my steps. 14. I listened to the signal. 14 pulses, evenly spaced, matching my pace exactly. I stopped. It stopped. I took 3 steps to the left. 3 pulses. I stamped my foot once. 1 pulse. Sharp and loud. Loud enough for Reynolds Jr. to hear it on the monitors in the next room. It's mirroring me. I don't know when it started. Maybe recently. Maybe years ago. Maybe it's been doing it since the beginning, and I was too focused on the frequency to notice the rhythm. But here's what frightens me. And I use that word carefully because after 36 years, very little about this work frightens me anymore. Here's what frightens me. It isn't just mirroring my movements in the cavern. I tested it at the house. I stomped on the floor above the basement. I listened. Pulse. Faint. So faint I almost missed it. But there, rising up through the rock and the soil and the concrete foundation, like a whisper through a wall. It knows where I live. It's always known, and it's been listening. I put the notebook down. I was sitting in the basement hallway, surrounded by 43 years of records, and I put the notebook down, and I pressed my palms against the floor. Concrete, cold, solid. Below the concrete, the foundation. Below the foundation, soil. Below the soil, rock. And below the rock, far below, but not far enough, a hole. A hole with no bottom. A hole that listened. A hole that learned. I pressed my palms harder against the floor, as if I could feel it, as if the signal would travel up through the concrete and into my skin and tell me something. Anything. The floor was just a floor. But I didn't believe that anymore. I went upstairs. I needed air. I needed light. I needed to stand under the sky and feel the wind and remind myself that the world was big and open and full of space. I walked out the back door onto the porch. The afternoon sun was weak but present. The tree line stood about 40 yards away, bare branches against the gray sky. I breathed. I let my hands shake. I let the fear move through me because fighting it was worse. And then I looked toward the tree line, toward the spot where, 20 years ago, a 12-year-old boy had found a ring of stones with a carved post in the center. The stones were still there. I could see them from the porch. The grass was shorter around them, as if the ground itself refused to grow too close. The post was still standing, still gray, still carved. But there was something else. Something new. Another post. Maybe 30 feet from the first ring, closer to the house. A second ring of stones around it. And beyond that, I squinted a third. And a fourth. Stretching in a rough line from the tree line toward the house like a trail of markers. Like breadcrumbs. Those hadn't been there when I was 12. I was sure of it. Grandpa Earl must have placed them over the years, expanding the perimeter, maintaining something, a boundary, a containment. But a containment of what? The hole was underground. These markers were on the surface. What could surface markers possibly do to contain something buried hundreds of feet below the earth? Unless it wasn't staying underground. Unless it was growing. I went back to the notebooks. I skipped ahead to the final years. February 4th, 2023. The monitoring station has been unmanned for 3 months. Chen retired. Her replacement, a man named Whitfield, lasted 2 weeks before requesting a transfer. No new director has been assigned. No new crew has been recruited. The last message I received from the program office was in November. It read, "Operation suspended pending review. Maintain personal protocols." Personal protocols. That's their way of telling me I'm on my own. I'm 82 years old. My knees are bad. My eyesight is going. I can't make the hike to the cavern entrance anymore. Not in winter, not on these trails. But it doesn't matter. The cavern isn't where the work is anymore. The work is here, at the house, in the basement, on the ridge. The signal reaches the house now. Not faintly, clearly. I can feel it through the floorboards at night. 7 hertz, steady, patient. It doesn't need the monitoring equipment. It doesn't need the observation window. It knows I'm here. I know it's there. We've been having this conversation for 42 years and we don't need instruments anymore. I maintain the markers. I add new ones when the readings shift. I don't know if they work. I don't know if anything I've done has ever worked, or if it's simply chosen to stay where it is for reasons I'll never understand. Maybe the markers are a comfort for me, not a containment for it. Maybe all of this has been theater, a man building a cage around a god and calling it security. But I keep building, because the alternative is to stop. And stopping means admitting that none of it mattered. And I can't do that. Not after 42 years. Not after everyone I've watched it consume. October 19th, 2023. Something new happened tonight. I was lying in bed, not sleeping. I haven't really slept in years, not the way normal people sleep, and the signal changed. Not in frequency, in direction. For 42 years, the signal has come from below, always below, rising up through the rock like heat through a stove. Tonight, it came from the side, from the wall, from the east wall of the bedroom, the one that faces the ridge. I got up. I put my hand on the wall. The plaster was vibrating. Not much, just a tremor. But it was there, and it was rhythmic, and the rhythm was not 7 hertz. It was faster, maybe 12 hertz, maybe 14, like a heartbeat during exertion, like something that was moving. I went to the window. I looked out at the ridge. The moon was half full, and the trees were silver and black, and everything was still. Except for one tree. About 60 yards out, at the edge of the marker line, a poplar, tall, leafless. It was swaying. Not the way trees sway in wind, there was no wind. It was swaying in a circle, slowly, deliberately, like something beneath it was turning. I watched it for 20 minutes. It didn't stop. In the morning I went out to look. The tree was dead, not dying dead. Every branch was brittle and gray, the bark was peeling, and at the base of the trunk, the ground was cracked. Hairline fractures in the soil, radiating outward in a pattern I recognized. Concentric circles with a line through the center, the same symbol carved into the marker posts. It's not staying underground anymore. January 15th, 2024. I know what I have to do. I've known for a while. I've just been putting it off because I'm old and I'm tired, and I was hoping stupidly, selfishly, that it would wait. That whatever timetable it's operating on would extend beyond my lifetime, that I could die in this chair and let it be someone else's problem. But that's not how it works. It doesn't follow our timeline. It follows its own. And its timeline says now. The signal has been below 5 hertz for 3 days straight. The markers on the north line have shifted, not fallen, shifted, moved, like the ground beneath them is being rearranged. I set them in concrete in 2019. Concrete doesn't shift. I hear it at night. Not the signal, not the hum. Something else. A voice. My voice. Coming from the basement. I sit in my chair and I listen to myself talking. The words muffled by the floor, by the concrete, by the layers of earth and rock. And I understand what it's doing. It learned me. 43 years of listening to my footsteps, my breathing, my heartbeat. It learned me the way you learn a language. And now it's speaking me, practicing, getting the inflections right. It's not mimicking me, it's becoming me. And when it's finished, when it has every syllable, every cadence, every pause and breath and tremor, it will call out in my voice. And someone will answer. Someone who loves me. Someone who trusts the sound of my name in the way only a grandchild or a daughter trusts it. I can't let that happen. I need to write everything down. Every rule, every observation, every mistake. So that whoever finds this knows what they're dealing with. So they know the rules. So they know what not to do. And then I need to make sure the door stays locked. That was the last entry in the 2024 notebook. I checked. The pages after it were blank. I checked the shelf for a 2025 notebook. There wasn't one. Grandpa Earl had died in March 2025, 6 months after that final entry. And in those 6 months, he hadn't written a single word, but the door hadn't stayed locked. The door was open when I arrived. The deadbolt was disengaged, and the key that had lived around his neck for 4 decades, was gone. Not on his body, according to my mother. Not in his personal effects. Not anywhere in the house that I'd found. Someone had opened the door, or something. I sat on the basement floor, and I thought about that for a long time. I thought about the timeline. Grandpa Earl dies in March. My mother finds him the next morning. The house sits empty for 2 weeks before I arrive. During those 2 weeks, the door is unlocked. The basement is accessible. And below the basement, below the foundation, below the rock, the signal is still pulsing. I could feel it. Even now, sitting on the concrete, I could feel it. That deep, patient vibration. 7 hertz, steady, like a sleeping breath. Except, I didn't think it was sleeping anymore. I thought it was waiting. I came upstairs. I packed the notebooks, and all of them, every box from 1981 to 2024, into my truck. It took 4 trips. The sun was going down by the time I finished. I was sweating despite the cold. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was exertion. I knew it wasn't. I went back inside to get my bag from the bedroom. I was leaving. I was getting in the truck and driving north, and I was never coming back to this house. I was going to take the notebooks to someone, a journalist, a professor, the goddamn FBI. Anyone who would listen, and I was going to make this someone else's problem. Because I am not my grandfather. I don't have 43 years of discipline. I don't have rules tattooed on the inside of my eyelids. I am a mechanical engineer who designs load-bearing structures, and I am not equipped for this. I grabbed my bag. I walked down the hallway toward the front door. The basement door was closed. I stopped. I had left it open. I was certain of it. I'd been going up and down those stairs all day, and I had not once closed that door because closing it felt too much like the house was swallowing the evidence. I had left it open. It was closed now. And as I stood there, staring at the white paint and the brass deadbolt, I heard something that emptied every rational thought from my mind like water from a tipped glass. A voice, from behind the door, from below, my grandfather's voice. "Come down here, son. I need to show you something." The words were perfect. The cadence was perfect. The warmth, the gravel, the slight Appalachian drawl. It was him. It was exactly him. If I'd heard it on a recording, I would have sworn in court that Earl David Maddox was alive and speaking from the basement of his own house. But Earl David Maddox was dead. He'd been dead for 3 weeks. His body was in the ground at Harlan Memorial Cemetery, and whatever was speaking in his voice was not him. It was something that had spent 43 years learning him, cataloging every syllable, memorizing every breath, and it was calling me down. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I remembered Rule 4. If you hear a familiar voice, do not respond. Do not acknowledge it. Leave immediately. I took 1 step back, then another. "I know you read the books," the voice said. It sounded amused, patient, like a grandfather waiting for a child to stop being stubborn. "I know you're scared. It's all right. Come on down. I'll explain everything." Another step back. My heel hit the edge of the living room carpet. The front door was behind me. 10 feet, maybe 12. "You're just like your mother," the voice said. And now there was something else in it. Something underneath the warmth. Like a second voice layered beneath the first. A resonance that didn't belong to a human throat. She never listened either. I turned. I ran. I hit the screen door with my shoulder, and it flew open, and I was across the porch and in the yard, and the cold air hit me like a wall, and I didn't stop. I got in the truck. I turned the key. The engine caught. I threw it in reverse, and I was down the driveway and on Sutter Ridge Road before I took a breath. I didn't look back. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I kept my eyes on the road, and I drove. I drove for 2 hours before I stopped at a gas station in London, Kentucky. I sat in the parking lot with the engine running and the doors locked and the heater blowing, and I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and I shook. I shook for a long time. I made it back to Louisville that night. I carried the boxes of notebooks into my apartment. I stacked them against the wall in my living room. I locked the door. I checked the deadbolt twice. I closed every window. I turned on every light. Then I sat on the couch and I tried to think. I tried to be rational. I tried to be the mechanical engineer who believes in weight and force and the mathematics of how things hold together. I tried to build a framework for what I'd experienced, a structure that could bear the load of what I now knew. I couldn't. There was no framework. There was no structure. The load exceeded every calculation I could make. My grandfather had spent 43 years monitoring an entity, I can't call it anything else, that lived inside a bottomless hole in the mountains of eastern Kentucky. An entity that listened, that learned, that mimicked, that consumed. And now my grandfather was dead, and the monitoring station was abandoned, and the door was open, and the entity was speaking in his voice. And I had all of his notebooks, 43 years of observations, 43 years of rules. And I had broken the most important one. I had listened. I had stood in that hallway, and I had heard my grandfather's voice, and I had listened. I hadn't responded. Thank God, I hadn't responded, but I had listened. And according to Grandpa Earl's notes, listening was enough. Listening was the first step. Listening meant it knew you were there. Listening meant it had a thread to follow. The signal follows attention, he wrote in 2009. It doesn't need a wire or a frequency or a medium. It needs a mind that's aware of it. That's the conduit, consciousness itself. Once you know it exists, it knows you exist. And once it knows you exist, the connection is open, and it doesn't close. I read that passage sitting on my couch in Louisville, 150 miles from Harlan County, and I understood it in a way I didn't want to understand. The connection was open. I noticed the first sign 3 days later. I was at work, sitting at my desk, reviewing structural calculations for a parking garage in Bowling Green. Normal work. Normal day. The office was its usual hum of keyboards and quiet conversation, and the air conditioning cycling on and off. And then I felt it. A vibration. In the floor, through my shoes, through the soles of my feet, up into my ankles. 7 hertz. I knew the frequency now. I knew it the way you know your own heartbeat, not by measurement, but by feel. Steady, patient, rhythmic. I lifted my feet off the floor. The vibration stopped. I put them back down. It started again. I looked around the office. No one else seemed to notice. My coworker Dave was eating a sandwich at the next desk. Sarah was on a phone call by the window. The building wasn't shaking. The floor wasn't moving, but I could feel it. Right there, right beneath me, the signal was pulsing. I packed up my laptop and went home early. I told my boss I had a headache. It wasn't entirely a lie. At home I felt it again. Lying in bed that night, the vibration came through the mattress. Faint, almost imperceptible. But there. I pressed my ear against the pillow and I could hear it. Not with my ears exactly, but with that deeper sense. The one that registers bass notes and earthquakes and the sound of your own blood moving through your body. 7 hertz. Steady. Close. It had followed me. Or I had brought it with me. Or the connection Grandpa Earl wrote about the one that opens when you become aware had stretched across 150 miles of highway, and it was vibrating like a plucked string with me on one end and the hole on the other. I didn't sleep. I sat up in bed with the lights on, and I read more notebooks, and I looked for a rule that covered this. A rule for what happens when it follows you home. There wasn't one. Grandpa Earl had never left. In 43 years, he'd never moved more than a few miles from the site. He'd built his life around the hole. He'd structured his entire existence as a containment protocol. And now I understood why he'd lived alone, why he'd kept the house. quiet. Why he'd maintained the markers and oiled the doors and slept in a chair facing the television with the volume off. He wasn't watching the Weather Channel. He was listening, monitoring, making sure the signal stayed at baseline, making sure the thing beneath his house stayed where it was. And now he was gone. And the signal was in my floor, in my apartment in Louisville, in a building that had no markers, no protocols, no 43 years of careful, disciplined containment. Over the next week, the signs multiplied. The vibration was constant now. Not strong, never strong enough to rattle a glass or move a piece of paper, but constant. Like living above a subway tunnel. Like the building had a heartbeat. Then the sound started. Small things at first. A tap on the wall behind my bed. A creak in the hallway that sounded like a footstep, but wasn't. The faucet in the bathroom turning on by itself. Just a trickle, just enough to make a sound, and always at night. Always after 9. I started keeping the apartment silent after dark. No television, no music, no phone calls. I moved through the rooms in socks, carefully, deliberately, placing each foot the way Grandpa Earl must have placed his for 43 years. I brushed my teeth with the door closed. I ate dinner before sunset. I set my phone to silent and turned off every notification. The silence helped. On quiet nights, the sounds were fewer. The signal stayed at baseline. Whatever was happening beneath my floor seemed to settle, as if silence was a language it respected, as if quiet meant compliance. But on the nights when I forgot, when a text notification chirped, when I dropped a spoon, when I coughed too loudly, the signal spiked. I could feel the frequency shift, dropping lower, slower, heavier, and the sounds would come. The taps, the creaks, the water, and once, just once, a voice. I was brushing my teeth 3 weeks after I'd returned from Harlan County. It was 10:15 at night. I was being careful, moving slowly, keeping quiet, and from the drain of the bathroom sink, from the black circle of the open drain, I heard a sound. Not a word, not yet. More like a breath, an exhalation that rose up through the pipes with a resonance that no pipe should have been able to produce. It was warm. It sounded close, like someone breathing on the back of your neck in a dark room. I froze. My toothbrush was in my mouth. Toothpaste was dripping down my chin. I stared at the drain. The breath came again. Longer this time. And at the end of it, right at the very end, so faint I could have imagined it, a sound that might have been a syllable, the first syllable of my name. I spat the toothpaste into the toilet. I didn't use the sink. I left the bathroom and closed the door, and I didn't open it again until morning. I called my mother. I didn't tell her about the notebooks or the basement or the hole. I called her because I needed to hear her voice and because I needed to ask her one question. Mom, did Grandpa ever talk to you about his work? His real work, not the Department of Interior stuff? Silence on the line. Long enough that I checked to make sure the call was still connected. Why are you asking? She said. I found some things at the house, in the basement. More silence. And then very quietly she said, I told him to destroy those. My stomach dropped. You knew? I knew enough. I knew too much. He sat me down when your grandmother was dying, and he told me some of it, not all of it. Enough to make me never want to go in that house again. Mom, what did he tell you? He told me there was something under the mountain, something old, something that shouldn't be disturbed. He said he was keeping it contained. He said it was his job and he took it seriously, and he would do it until he died. And I said, Daddy, that's insane. And he looked at me. You know that look he had, that measuring look, and he said, I wish it were, baby girl. God, I wish it were. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles ached. Did he ever tell you what it was? No. And I never asked. I didn't want to know. I still don't want to know. A pause. "Why? What did you find?" I almost told her. The words were right there, pushing against the back of my teeth. But then I remembered what Grandpa Earl wrote. It uses love as bait, grief as a doorway, longing as a rope. I remembered that the connection opens through awareness, that once you know it exists, it knows you exist. And I couldn't do that to her. I couldn't open that door in her mind and invite the signal in. "Just some old journals," I said. "Nothing important." She didn't believe me. I could hear it in the silence, but she let it go. Because she'd learned the same lesson Grandpa Earl had. The same lesson I was learning now. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. And the only protection is to never open them at all. I tried to go back to normal. I went to work, I reviewed plans, I attended meetings, I ate lunch with Dave and talked about basketball and the weather, and 100 meaningless things that felt like cardboard in my mouth. At night I went home and I sat in the silence and I waited. The signal was getting stronger. Not louder, it was never loud, but more present, more textured. Where before it had been a simple pulse, now it had layers, harmonics, like a single note evolving into a chord. And within that chord I could sometimes hear or feel patterns that seemed to carry meaning. Not words, not yet, but the architecture of words. The scaffolding of language, being assembled from vibration and pressure and the physics of sound, traveling through solid matter. It was learning to speak through my floor, through my walls, through the pipes and the wires and the concrete and the steel of a building in Louisville, Kentucky, 150 miles from the nearest entrance to the hole. And it was using my grandfather's voice. I heard it clearly for the first time on a Friday night in April. I was sitting on the couch reading Grandpa Earl's 1995 notebook, and the signal dropped. I felt it, the frequency diving from 7 to 4 to 3 to something lower, something that made my vision blur and my ears ring. And then, from everywhere and nowhere, from the walls, from the floor, from the space inside my own skull, I heard, "You're doing good, son. Just keep reading. I left it all for you." My grandfather's voice. Perfect, warm, alive. I closed the notebook. I closed my eyes. I did not respond. "It's all right to be scared," the voice said. "I was scared too at first. But you get used to it. You learn to live with it. You learn to listen." I put my hands over my ears. "You can't block it out," the voice said. And now it was amused, gently amused, the way Grandpa Earl used to sound when I insisted I wasn't tired at bedtime. "It's not in the air, son. It's in the connection. And the connection is already open." I sat there with my hands over my ears for 10 minutes. The voice didn't come again, but the signal stayed low. 3 hertz, maybe lower for the rest of the night. I sat on the couch and I didn't move and I didn't speak and I barely breathed. And I waited for morning the way a drowning man waits for the surface. The next day I went to the library. I don't know why, maybe because libraries feel safe, maybe because knowledge feels like armor, maybe because I needed to be somewhere that wasn't my apartment. I searched for anything related to Harlan Station, SRI, the Department of Interior Resource Management Division. I found nothing. No records, no references, no archived articles. Whatever Harlan Station was, it had been erased from every public database I could access. But I found something else. In a 1979 edition of a geological survey journal, tucked into the periodicals section, I found a paper by a USGS hydrologist named Dr. David Renner. The paper was about anomalous subsurface acoustic emissions in the Appalachian coalfields. Most of it was technical frequencies, wavelengths, geological formations, but there was a paragraph near the end that stopped me cold. Of particular note is the acoustic signature detected at Site 7-K, a sealed mine entrance in Harlan County, Kentucky. The emission at this site is continuous, rhythmic, and does not correspond to any known geological process. The frequency, 7.1 Hz, falls within the range associated with infrasound-induced psychological effects in human subjects, including anxiety, disorientation, and perceived peripheral visual disturbances. The source of the emission remains unidentified. Further investigation of this site was discontinued by federal order in 1974. Site 7-K, Harlan County, 7.1 Hertz. Discontinued by federal order. It was real. It was documented. Someone outside of Grandpa Earl's world had measured it and written it down and published it in a journal in 1979, and then the investigation had been shut down and the paper had been buried in the periodical section of a library in Louisville, and no one had read it in 45 years. Until me. I photocopied the page. I drove home. I put the photocopy on the kitchen table next to the photograph from Grandpa Earl's closet. The 9 men in front of the concrete building. Harlan Station Crew, 6, 1984. God help us. And I stared at them both. 2 pieces of evidence. 2 threads connecting the world I knew to the world my grandfather had lived in for 43 years. It wasn't much. But it was enough to confirm the thing I'd been trying to deny since the moment I'd first felt the vibration through the basement floor. This was real. All of it. The whole, the signal, the entity, the voice. Real. I stopped sleeping. Not by choice, my body simply refused. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the frequency shift. Every time I drifted toward unconsciousness, the signal pulled me back, like a hand on my collar. As if whatever was on the other end of the connection wanted me awake, wanted me aware, wanted the channel open. By the 3rd day without sleep, I started seeing things. Not hallucinations, nothing that dramatic. Just inconsistencies. Shadows that didn't match their sources. Reflections in windows that lagged behind my movements by half a second. The edges of rooms looking slightly wrong, like the angles had been adjusted by a degree or 2. I remember standing in my kitchen, pouring water into a glass and noticing that the shadow of my hand on the counter was pointing the wrong direction. The light was coming from the ceiling fixture. The shadow should have been directly below, but it was stretching toward the wall, toward the east wall, toward Harlan County. I dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor and the sound was enormous in the silent apartment. And in the silence after the impact, the signal spiked so hard I felt it in my teeth, in my sinuses, in the roots of my hair. And something knocked on the floor beneath me. 3 knocks. Even spacing. Like someone standing in the apartment below mine and rapping their knuckles on their ceiling. Except I live on the ground floor. Below me is the foundation. Below the foundation is dirt. Below the dirt is rock. 3 knocks. Patient, polite. The way you knock on a door when you know the person inside is pretending not to be home. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I stood in the kitchen with broken glass around my feet and water soaking my socks, and I didn't breathe for so long that my vision started to darken at the edges. The knocks didn't come again. But the signal stayed low for the rest of the night. And when I finally sat down on the couch as the sun was coming up, I noticed something on the living room wall. A crack, hairline thin, running from the baseboard to about waist height. I'd never seen it before. I pressed my finger against it and felt or imagined I felt a pulse. Faint, rhythmic, 7 hertz. The crack was warm. I started reading Grandpa Earl's notebooks with a desperation that bordered on obsession. I wasn't reading for understanding anymore. I was reading for survival. Every entry, every observation, every rule, I cataloged them. I made lists. I created a spreadsheet on my laptop, cross-referencing signal frequencies with behavioral patterns, trying to build the mathematical model that my grandfather had built through 43 years of intuition. And somewhere in the 2008 notebook, buried between routine observations, I found something that gave me a thin, cold thread of hope. April 4th, 2008. There is one thing it doesn't like. One thing that causes the signal to withdraw, not stop. It never stops but retreat, pull back, like a hand touching a hot stove. Salt. I discovered it accidentally. I was resetting the marker on the north line. the one nearest the house, and I'd brought a bag of rock salt for the ice on the path. Some of it spilled near the base of the marker post. The signal, which had been running at 5 Hz that morning, elevated, restless, jumped to 9 Hz within minutes, higher than baseline, higher than I'd ever recorded. It was as if the signal was retreating, pulling itself deeper, further from the surface, further from the salt. I tested it again the next day, poured a line of salt across the basement floor. The vibration in the house stopped completely for 6 hours. 6 hours of absolute silence. I'd forgotten what silence felt like. Real silence. Not the disciplined, controlled quiet that I've maintained for decades, but true silence. The absence of the signal. The absence of it. It came back, of course. The salt line degraded moisture in the concrete, absorbed it, and by nightfall the signal was at baseline again. But those 6 hours were the most peaceful I'd spent in 27 years. I don't know why salt works. I don't understand the mechanism. Maybe it's chemical. The sodium disrupts whatever medium the signal travels through. Maybe it's older than chemistry. Maybe there's a reason that every culture in human history has used salt for purification and protection and the warding off of evil. I don't care about the reason. I care about the result. I went to the store at 6 in the morning. I bought 50 pounds of rock salt. I came home and I poured lines across every doorway, every windowsill, every crack in the floor and wall. I poured salt around the perimeter of my bed. I poured it along the baseboards of every room. I made a circle of salt on the kitchen floor, and I stood in the center of it, and I waited. The signal faded. Not instantly, it took about 20 minutes, but it faded. The vibration in the floor diminished, weakened, and finally stopped. The low hum that had been living in the back of my skull since Harlan County went quiet. The air in the apartment changed. It became lighter, cleaner, like stepping outside after being in a closed room for hours. I cried. I stood in a circle of rock salt on my kitchen floor, and I cried because for the first time in weeks I couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel the signal. I couldn't feel the attention. I was alone in my own apartment, in my own body, in my own mind, and the connection was, if not closed, at least muffled, dimmed, like a radio turned down to static. I slept that night. 8 hours, dreamless, the best sleep of my life. But it didn't last. Grandpa Earl had warned me. The salt degrades, moisture absorbs it. The effect is temporary. By the second day, the lines were fading, turning gray, dissolving into the carpet and the concrete and the grout. By the third day, the signal was back. Faint at first, then stronger. By the fourth day, it was at baseline, and it was angry. I don't know how else to describe it. The signal wasn't just present, it was aggressive. The frequency was lower than I'd ever felt it. The vibration wasn't in the floor anymore. It was in the walls, in the ceiling, in the air. Like the entire apartment was inside a bell that had been struck, and the reverberation was building instead of fading. The cracks appeared overnight. Not one. Dozens. Hairline fractures spreading across the living room wall like veins beneath skin. All warm to the touch. All pulsing at 7 Hz. And the voice came back. Not from the floor this time. From the cracks themselves. "That wasn't kind," it said. My grandfather's voice. My grandfather's cadence, but underneath it visible now, like seeing through a mask something else. Something that used warmth the way an anglerfish uses light. I thought we were getting to know each other. I poured more salt. I poured it into the cracks. I pressed it into the wall with my palms. The voice stopped mid-word, cutting off like a switched-off microphone. The signal retreated, but this time, it only stayed quiet for 3 hours. "I'm running out of salt. I'm running out of time. I'm running out of the ability to pretend that any of this is manageable." It's been 11 weeks since I went down into my grandfather's basement. 11 weeks since I opened the notebooks. 11 weeks since the connection opened and the signal found me, and the voice started speaking. "I've stopped going to work. I told my boss I had a family emergency. That was 5 weeks ago. He stopped calling. I think I've been fired. I don't care. I can't sit in an office and feel the signal pulsing through the floor and pretend to calculate load-bearing capacities for parking garages. I can't look at structural equations while the structure of my own reality is cracking apart. The cracks are in every room now. They're spreading. They follow me, or they follow the signal, and the signal follows me, so the effect is the same. When I sit in one spot for too long, the cracks concentrate around me. When I walk to the kitchen, new ones appear on the kitchen wall. When I lie in bed, the ceiling above me fractures in patterns I recognize. Concentric circles with a line through the center. The symbol. The same symbol carved into the marker posts. The same symbol that appeared at the base of the dead poplar on Grandpa Earl's property. It's being written into the walls of my apartment by something that lives inside a bottomless hole in a mountain 150 miles away. Or is it 150 miles away? I don't think distance matters anymore. I don't think it ever did. The hole isn't a place, it's a condition. It's what happens to reality when something impossibly old and impossibly patient presses against it from the other side. The hole in the mountain is just where it first wore through. The cracks in my walls are new holes, new weak points, new places where the skin of the world is getting thin. And on the other side, I can feel it now. I can feel it all the time. Something is pressing. Something enormous, something that has been pressing for longer than humanity has existed, that started pressing before there were words to describe what pressing means. And the skin is getting thinner, and the cracks are getting wider, and the voice is getting clearer. Last night, it stopped pretending to be my grandfather. I was lying in bed, surrounded by a circle of salt that I'd refreshed an hour earlier. The signal was at baseline, muffled, distant, tolerable. I was reading the 2002 notebook, trying to find anything I'd missed, any rule or observation that might help. And the voice came. But it wasn't Grandpa Earl's voice. It was something else. Something that had been underneath all along, wearing his voice like a borrowed coat. And now it was speaking in its own voice. And that voice was, I don't have words. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure, a weight, a gravity that pulled at the inside of my skull and made my thoughts feel like objects that could be picked up and examined. It didn't use language. It used something older than language, something that went straight past my ears and my brain and my rational mind and spoke directly to the part of me that is afraid of the dark. The part that knows, even after millions of years of evolution and science and electric lights, that the dark is not empty, that something lives there that it always has. And it said not in words, but in the pure, unfiltered meaning that exists before words. You opened the door. You read the books. You heard the name. The connection is open. The connection does not close. I have been patient. I am very, very patient. I was patient for the old man, and I will be patient for you. You will not run. There is nowhere to run. I am not in the mountain. I am in the space between things. I am in the gap between one heartbeat and the next. I am in the pause between one breath and the other. I am in the silence that your grandfather understood, and that you are only beginning to learn. You will come to me. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually, because curiosity is a rope, and you are already halfway down. I will wait. I'm writing this from a motel room in Indiana. I packed my truck with the notebooks, the photograph, the photocopy from the library, and as much salt as I could carry. I left Louisville in the middle of the night. I drove north because north was away, and away was all I had. The signal is here. It's fainter, the salt helps, the distance helps, the motion helps, but it's here. I can feel it in the floor of this motel room, in the thin carpet and the concrete slab and the earth beneath the foundation. 7 hertz. Steady. Patient. It's always going to be here. I understand now what my grandfather meant in that last entry, when he wrote that he needed to make sure the door stayed locked. He wasn't talking about the basement door. He was talking about the connection, the awareness, the knowing. Once you know, you can't unknow. Once the signal finds you, it doesn't lose you. The door isn't a physical door. It's a door in your mind, and it opens from the inside. and it opens with attention. And every time you think about the hole, every time you remember the signal, the voice, the cracks, the symbol, you're turning the handle. And I can't stop thinking about it. I've tried. God, I've tried. I've tried thinking about work, about sports, about music, about anything. But the signal is there. Always there. Pulsing beneath every thought like a bass note beneath a melody. And every time I notice it, every time my attention flicks to it for even a second, I feel the connection strengthen. The frequency drops. The voice gets closer. It's feeding on my awareness of it, my knowledge of it, my fear of it, and I am very, very afraid. I want to end this by telling you something useful, some instruction, some rule that will protect you if you find yourself where I am. But I'm not sure there are rules for this. My grandfather's rules were designed for containment for a man who chose to stay in one place and hold the line for 43 years. They weren't designed for someone who ran. Someone who opened the door and read the books and heard the voice and then got in a truck and spread the signal across 2 state lines like a virus jumping hosts. But I'll try. For whatever it's worth, I'll try. If you ever find yourself near Harlan County, Kentucky, near the eastern coal fields, near the old mining roads, and you feel a vibration in the ground that you can't explain, walk away. Don't investigate. Don't ask questions. Don't look for old mine entrances or sealed shafts or strange stone markers in the woods. The vibration is not geological. It is not mechanical. It is not natural. It is a signal, and the signal is a lure. If someone tells you a story about a bottomless hole in the mountains, a friend, a family member, a stranger in a bar, change the subject. Don't listen. Don't let the details take root in your mind, because the details are seeds, and what they grow is awareness, and awareness is the only thing the signal needs. If you hear a voice in the silence, a voice you recognize, a voice you trust, a voice that sounds like someone you love, do not respond. I don't care how real it sounds. I don't care how much it sounds like them. It is not them. It has never been them. It is something that feeds on recognition and responds to grief and crawls through the spaces that love leaves behind when it breaks. And if you read this, all of it, every word, from beginning to end, and you feel something in the floor beneath you, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The connection is open now, for you too, and I don't know how to close it. No one does. I'm going back to Harlan County in the morning. Not because I want to, because the signal is louder there. And if it's going to be loud everywhere I go for the rest of my life, I might as well go where my grandfather's markers still stand, where the salt lines are drawn, where someone spent 43 years learning how to live with this and left 43 notebooks worth of instructions. I'm going back to the house on Sutter Ridge Road. I'm going to lock the basement door. I'm going to refresh the markers. I'm going to pour salt into every crack and every seam and every gap between the world I know and the world that presses against it from the other side. I'm going to sit in my grandfather's recliner, and I'm going to turn on the Weather Channel and turn the volume all the way down, and I'm going to listen to the silence. Because that's the job now. That's my inheritance. Not the house, not the land, not the memories of summers and fishing and butterscotch candy. The hole, the signal, the thing that waits at the bottom of a bottomless place and speaks in the voices of the dead and presses against the skin of the world with a patience that makes mountains look impatient. I can feel it now, even as I write this, even as the words leave my fingers and enter this screen. 7 hertz. Steady, close. Closer than it was an hour ago. Closer than it was yesterday. It's in the walls of this motel room. It's in the floor. It's in the pipes and the wires and the concrete and the soil and the rock beneath the soil. It's everywhere I've ever been and everywhere I'll ever go. And it's patient. And it's waiting. And the door is open. I can hear it breathing.